The Rings of Power, Part 2. It's rather difficult for me to reconcile my deep devotion for the work of Tolkien with the fact that a trillion-dollar megacorporation has taken up the mantle of interpreting his lifelong body of work. I've read The Lord of the Rings once, and The Hobbit is one of my top 3 favorite books of all time. The Silmarillion turned my brain to tapioca pudding in 5 pages with its sheer density of lore and lovingly antiquated phraseology from a bygone era. Thus, I have never delved back into it. Some of my earliest memories are of Saturday afternoons spent rolling dice and listening to Led Zeppelin, while sneaking off to smoke a bit of the pipeweed and drinking just enough of the parents' wine so as to go unnoticed. The first film project I ever dreamt of completing was that of an elven burial site, visited lovingly by someone of obvious personal significance to the deceased, on a late summer's night, gloriously shrouded by ambient light and falling leaves, a chorus of woodwinds playing against a somber tome of Elvish. I even tried to learn Elvish, and carried a language source book for a time, poring over it on lunch breaks from the student bookstore I was working at. And now comes the question. Is this Tolkien? Very loosely. Is it stunning fantasy storytelling? Well, I'm willing to stand behind that statement, at least through episode 2. Only the most cynical of souls can deny a flower its right to blossom, and further still destroy it as a seedling. So, am I suggesting a settlement based on comparative acceptance? No. I am suggesting an attempt at appreciation of that which is offered, an acceptance that some things are lost to time, like absolute and immeasurable talent. I am suggesting an understanding of the limitations of those that are not Tolkien, and a modest amount of deference to the collective narrative dissonance that has pervaded the popular critical reviewing of this interpretation of a masterwork. Having said that, I'm now 5 episodes in, and this show has already lost much of whatever momentum it had to begin with. The characters whom only 3 episodes ago I found heart, strength, and presence within have become a gurgling mush of utterly forgettable names ending in deal, dear, and dur. The plot pacing has slowed to that of a 90-year-old snail dipped in salt, and I find myself wondering just how many of these pretentiously posturing and preposterously ponderous conversations I shall be forced to endure before something of substance is mined from the flinty shale of these exceptionally long-winded and sanctimonium-saddled diatribes. Our main protagonist, Galadriel, who has snarled complicitly from being trapped in the open ocean to being trapped on an island to being trapped in a cage, seems to have but 2 emotions, complacency and pissed, dead set on rejecting any inkling of a character development arc. The she-elf and discount Aragorn have been stuck arguing in Númenor for what feels like an entire age, and in the meantime we're introduced to several other cardboard cutouts which serve only as the most boring of side characters, whose sole purpose seems to be to make our main characters seem more interesting by comparison. While we're on the topic of character assassination, let's talk about Isildur, the boy who will one day become the great king that cuts the ring from Sauron's finger. In this telling of events, he's an obnoxious, self-serving, spoiled brat who seems unwaveringly intent on making the lives of everyone around him worse. Elrond continues to overstay his welcome in Khazad-dûm, offering unsolicited advice whenever possible, and Durin and his dwarven wife Disa continue to be the shining stars in this pitch-black night of paper-thin characters. Arondir is captured by orcs, makes a wholly improbable escape, is captured again, and escapes again, to join up with Bronwyn and Theo, the boy who is in possession of the Morgul-bladed hilt of Sauron himself, and who has been approached for recruitment by the local blacksmith, original owner of the hilt, and whose mind has turned sour from possessing it for so many years. Arondir tells the boy that, like the One Ring, Sauron can see who is in possession of the hilt, and will be sending his forces of evil to retrieve it. That brings me to another aspect of the series that I haven't seen discussed much. It has several plot devices and character relationships that are so similar to that of The Lord of the Rings that it's starting to lose its own identity. A singular object, sought after by the villain, now possessed by simple country folk, which the villain sees in his mind's eye and will wish to retain ownership of, which also corrupts the mind of the wielder. A so far unknown and welcome roguelike character born of a royal lineage whose house has fallen into ill repute, but who may one day soon reclaim his right as lord of the free men. A return of the king, if you will. An at first shaky union of elves and dwarves, which will undoubtedly become a closer bond as the journey continues. I could go on, but I think you see the point. Certainly these threads can all be wound around different fingers, but their similarity to those of the original trilogy are not hard to recognize. The show has the unfortunate fate of being the lesser part of a full story. If The Lord of the Rings is the main course in this fantasy banquet, then the Rings of Power is the overcooked hors d'oeuvres that wants to succeed not on merit, but on association to that sumptuous Chateaubriand of spellbinding cinematic masterclass. Maybe I've let the pipeweed and the wine cloud my judgment to the detriment of finding something, anything good among the rotting corpses of my childhood endearments. Maybe I'm finally succumbing to the nagging of the ring, the cinematic cynicism of Sauron's hilt. Or maybe, just maybe, the show just isn't as good as I initially thought. Well, 5 down, 5 to go.